All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting marketing episode on placement. And today we're going to take a look at distribution channels, what they are, what they mean, how do we get products from point A to point B. All right, so make sure you get your notes, you follow the STORM philosophy, sit back and enjoy. All right, so what are you going to learn today? Well, we're going to talk about what placement is exactly. We often use placement and distribution interchangeably, so you often hear me say distribution or placement, but just remember they're the same thing. We're going to look at the components of placement, the degrees of placement, what do you need to consider when selecting a distribution channel, and then the 3 different types of channels. All right, so first up, what exactly is placement? Well, placement falls within the marketing mix in one of the 4 P's. It is the P in which gets the product to the consumer. Product is product. Price is how much consumers are going to pay for the product. Promotion is how we advertise it. And placement is how we get the product to the consumer. So placement means that products have to be available to consumers. Consumers have to be able to purchase your product, otherwise you will not have a successful product. You can choose a couple different ways to place your product, but really it's going to come down to 2 major options. It's either going to be available in a store or it's going to be delivered right to the consumer. So for placement to occur, marketers have to consider a couple different components. Marketers have to select, develop, and manage a distribution channel. Right? You have to manage how your product is going to get to the consumer. Then you're going to have to, as a marketer, get the actual product to the consumer. So that's the physical distribution of the goods. So this is where you have to consider trucks, rail, ships, planes, and other transportation or logistics options. And placement therefore can fall under 4 degrees of placement. It can be intensive, which means you want your product out there everywhere. Think if you are Coca-Cola, do you want your product everywhere? Absolutely. The more places it is, the more likely people are going to buy it. So you don't really care where it's available, you just want it out there. Selective would be that you do care. You want to make sure that your product carries with it that level of prestige that you want it to. So you're not going to make your product available everywhere. You don't want it to be found in stores that doesn't really align with your prestige level. So if you are, let's say, a Rolex watch, do you want your watch to be available at Dollarama? Probably not. Exclusive means that you've arranged a contract in terms of an agreement with a specific retailer where your product is only available at. So for many products, they are only available at specific stores. Integrated means that you control the distribution. You produce a product and you also manage the retail stores. So you do both the production and the service side of marketing. So what do you need to consider when you select a distribution channel? Well, number 1, your consumer. Who is your consumer? What is their income level? What are their buying habits? Do they expect to buy from the manufacturer directly because they may be an industrial consumer? Are they wealthy consumers, and do they expect exclusivity in their product selection? Right? How many consumers are there? And what are their buying habits? Where do they like to shop? Where do they often shop? Number 2, will the selected channel reach a sufficient number of consumers? If you distribute your product to a specific store and only that store, does it reach the intended target market in size and scope? Is it a seasonal or high fashion item? These items have shorter life cycles and thus they need shorter channels. Can the channel become a competitive advantage? Well, try to use unusual channels to differentiate your product if possible, and therefore you have a competitive advantage. Is the product custom made? If it's custom made, more likely than not, you need to ensure a direct distribution channel. Will the product spoil? You need shorter channels before it goes bad. You don't want your bananas to go through a number of different intermediaries before it reaches the market. What is the unit value of the product? A low unit value usually means longer channels to reach the many small distributors. If it is a high unit value, then you want to reach your distributors pretty quickly. And how large or heavy is the product? You definitely can't sell a car through a vending machine, so don't even try. So based on the answers to those previous questions, it's now time to choose your channel. Well, you have 3 options. You either can choose a direct channel, an indirect channel, or a specialty channel. Let's take a look at each. So the first up is a direct channel. This is where the product goes right from the producer to the consumer. Think a lemonade stand on the side of the road, or maybe even Square One Farmers Market. This is a producer that has a direct relationship with their customers, and therefore they foster greater trust. They want to make sure that they ensure that trust and get the product to the consumer. Typically, service-based businesses use direct channels as they're the only ones who can perform that service. Think of a restaurant who makes the food and sells it right to the customers at the table. However, what you might start to see is that some restaurants are starting to sell their products to supermarkets, so they're using a indirect channel such as Lick's Hamburgers. Some producers also own the retail outlets to sell their products. This is integrated distribution, so they can guarantee the quality and the service. This is also a direct channel even though it is a retail store. So what does it look like? Well, again, a direct channel goes right from the producer to the consumer. So they make the food and they sell it right to the consumer. There's a direct channel. Next up is an indirect channel. These channels use intermediaries. These are people or companies or organizations who take possessions of the goods, add a markup, and then resell them to consumers. So they would add a markup that would ensure they gain a certain slice of the pie. There's three major types of intermediaries. There's importers. They negotiate an exclusive distribution deal with foreign manufacturers or distributors, and they search the globe for products that would be successful in Canada and sign those exclusive distribution deals so they can be the only ones to sell the product and thus reap the rewards. Anyone else in Canada that wishes to sell the product, well, they must strike a deal with that importer. Wholesalers, they buy their products from domestic sources and then resell them to retail stores and other businesses. These sales are typically in large amounts and discounted prices. Costco, for example, is a wholesaler. Not only do they have amazing free samples, but they also sell huge amount of items in huge quantities at discounted prices. And lastly, are retailers. These are the final link in the indirect distribution chain. They sell their goods to their ultimate consumers, the right merchandise for the right price at the right time in the right place, providing the right quantities. So it's all about getting things right. So what does an indirect channel look like? Well, again, the producer manufactures the product. It's then sold to a wholesaler or an importer. Then it goes to the retailer and eventually it reaches the consumer. Or it might go from producer to retailer to consumer, such as the stores you find at Square One. Last up is specialty. Now these are channels of distribution that don't really fall into direct or indirect. They're special. These are any channels of distribution that does not involve a retail store. So vending machines are an example of an indirect or a specialty channel, right? They operate unattended. They dispense products. They're open 24/7. They only need occasional maintenance and refilling, and some companies operate their own. Others sell exclusive rights to companies to do this, but you'll find more and more very unique vending machines, such as the iPod vending machine you see there. The internet is a new specialty channel, and new is, in the relative sense. E-commerce is playing a huge role in today's marketing world. E-commerce simulates physical in-store purchases, but without the hassle, right? It's convenient, it's speedy, and offers great selection. However, the risk is obviously those identity thefts done by the NSA or other organizations, and you obviously have to wait time for the package to arrive and can't actually try on the products, but it is quick and convenient. Catalogs are one of those more historical specialty channels. Think the Eaton's catalog, if you can remember who or what Eaton's was, but basically the same as the internet but without the technology. Current versions of the catalog is the IKEA catalog. Products are offered in a magazine format, and order is placed through the form that you fill out and you mail it into the company. Current versions of catalogs obviously are accompanied by the internet forms that you fill out online. Telemarketing is another one. You sell products or services over the phone. Often these are the annoying calls you receive at dinner time and the ones that you hang up on, but for business to business sales it's an industry standard and often quite effective. Lastly is television sales. Think the Slap Chop or Blend It. Shopping channels or infomercials provide descriptions and demonstrations of the products to convince customers to purchase the product. Customer then calls the typically 1-800 or 188 number and then purchases the product using their credit card. So what do specialty channels look like? Well, again, the producer manufactures the product. It's then placed in a special way to attract the consumer, maybe through the television, and then the consumer eventually acquires the product. Well, that brings us to the end of our presentation. Think about what types of distribution channels you are most familiar with. Where do you acquire your products? And why is this the case? Think about what type of consumer you are, and maybe that will help you answer the question. So make sure you get your notes in order, make sure you've posed a discussion question, and we'll see you tomorrow. That's it. That's all. That's everything.